Welcome to a little conversation about the epic in literature. I love when I hear people talk about like parties being so epic, because it really does kind of capture some of the sort of energy of what an epic is and does. So let's start with the folk epic. A folk epic is the same thing as a literary epic, except that the folk epic evolves from the oral stories of a people. And so as our example, we're going to use the Bible. So what is an epic in general? An epic in general is long. It's generally poetic, and it needed to be poetic so that the scopes or the bards could sing them, and they could remember these long, long stories. There were set conventions, so there are certain features that always appear in an epic. And this makes the epic easier to reweave in its telling when new heroes or new stories begin to emerge from the historic reality of the people telling the story. Because in many ways, these were efforts to maintain the history of the people who were hearing them. The heroes represent cultural values. So the epic served multiple purposes. First, it was a way to pass down the history, but also to tell the younger people what they should and should not do, and what characteristics they should embody and what they should jettison. The heroes engage in battles that are cosmic in nature. They can think about the Avengers. The Avengers series is also an epic. So it's all these stories that take place over an entire universe, not just here on Earth or between Earth and, let's say, the sun, but like the universe. Star Wars is another example. And so the actions of the heroes affect the people who are hearing the story and also the people who are involved in the story. There are two kinds of epics, the primary, which is also called the folk epic, and the secondary, which is the literary epic. What makes them different is this. The primary epic comes from an oral tradition. So it emerges and evolves over time and is told and retold until finally someone writes it down, and then that becomes the version most people are familiar with. So think about the Bible. That's going to be our representation of the folk epic. The Bible comes from a great many stories told over hundreds of years that react to what was happening in Mesopotamia and then in Egypt. And so the stories show us something about how, for example, the Mesopotamians had a relationship with the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is very different from the Egyptians and their relationship with the Nile. So you'll start to see some of the myths begin to contrast with one another because they come from different places with different cultural values and different reactions to their world. But over time, someone writes them down, or multiple people write different stories down, and they become woven together. The epic that we're going to be focused on is the literary epic. This is a secondary epic. It's an epic that is written at a single moment in history by a single author with a literary purpose in mind. So unlike the folk epics, which were meant to be sung or listened to around the campfire or in the castle, the literary epic is meant to be read. So the single poet, like Milton, sits down at a single moment and writes Paradise Lost, using the same conventions, the same style, but now with a literary objective. So let's talk about what these conventions are. The first is that epics tend to start in what we call en medias res. That simply means in the middle of things. So when Milton begins Paradise Lost, the demons have already fought their counterparts in heaven and they wake up in hell. So the giant battle between the demons and the angels has already happened, and we don't get to hear about it until later in the story. In our first stanza, which we'll look at shortly, we hear the invocation. So this is the moment where the scope, or in our case, the writer, asks for the divine assistance of, in this case, the Holy Spirit. So Milton says, I'm not capable as a mere mortal in writing this story about the gods. So come down and inhabit my body and allow me, Holy Spirit, to tell the story correctly. Generally, also, you get a statement of theme, if not at the beginning or at the end, you get it somewhere close to the beginning or close to the end. And ours is going to appear in stanza 2. So we'll take a look at that when we start looking at our first book of Paradise Lost. So in this case, Milton is going to say, I want to do something that's never been done before in writing. And that thing that I want to do is to justify the ways of God to man. I want to explain why God's justice is, in fact, divine justice. Epithets are also common. These are renaming. So think about Dwayne Johnson. His epithet is the Rock. In college, my roommate was a pretty impressive basketball player, and her epithet was the Microwave. So we have all these epithets that we use for our modern heroes, and that comes from this epic convention. As I said before, epics are often intended, especially the primary or folk epic, to provide history. In the Bible, you have all of the begats. So those are the lists of whose child was whose, and then all of the genealogical lists that follow. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, there are also lists. For example, in the Iliad, we have all of the ships that disembark to go to Troy to face the enemy. So you have this whole list of who's on what ship and what generals and what soldiers and so on, so that we can remember those things. Beowulf does the same thing. There are all of these lists of heroes past, the heroes whose songs were sung before the great Beowulf. They're also lyrical. So the literary epic uses the lyrical structure of a poet who sits down in a single moment and decides to craft this lyrical text. Milton will use a variety of different poetic conventions. So he'll use meter. In some places he'll use rhyme and things that you'll recognize. In folk epics, generally in their original languages, they were very musical, again, so that vast lengths of text could be memorized. So gods and heroes are typical players or characters in epics. So think about the Harry Potter series. Our deities or supernatural agencies here are the witches and the Dementors and all of these different characters who are much larger than human, larger than life. In the Bible, of course, it's God. In Beowulf, it's this remarkable hero who can wrestle Grendel and drag her to the bottoms of the depths of the ocean. In Percy Jackson, of course, you have all the Greco-Roman gods, and so on and so on. And they always engage in single hand-to-hand combat because the hero has to prove himself as worthy. So in the Beowulf story, Beowulf will fight the fearful Grendel, and he does it completely naked, representing his own personal strength. He doesn't need a weapon, especially in the period in which this would have emerged, when personal weapons would have been very important to their warriors, and they would have been a symbol of that warrior's strength, courage, and pride. And this is a carryover into Harry Potter. Think about Harry Potter trying to get the sword that does whatever it does in Bellatrix Lestrange's little bank vault. Finally, epics usually emerge out of a period of upheaval. So in the Paradise Lost epic, we're going to learn a little bit about what was happening politically in England when Milton would have been writing this, and certainly what happened in the years before he started this epic to kind of solidify his need to write this. And one of the big things is Cromwell's interruption of the monarchy. And so the poems themselves are often very nationalistic. They have a pride that they want to offer to the people who are reading them. So thank you very much, and I will see you in class.